Maya Rodriguez pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the corridors of the Galactic Defense Academy. The walls were lined with portraits of famous human commanders and their victories. She had memorized every single one during her 3 years here, but she had never imagined her own face would ever join them. The morning bell rang across the campus. Maya quickened her pace toward Advanced Strategy Room 7. She was never late, but she was never early either. She preferred to slip in just as class began, taking her usual seat in the back corner where the light was dim and Professor Williams rarely looked. Maya entered the classroom and moved to her spot. 24 other cadets were already there, most of them clustered in the front rows. They talked loudly about weekend parties and upcoming assignments. She opened her notebook and checked her pen. Everything had to be ready before the professor arrived. "Attention!" Professor Williams strode into the room carrying a stack of data tablets. He was a retired fleet captain with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Today we continue our study of the Battle of Europa Station. Who can tell me why Admiral Peterson chose to position his ships in a defensive ring formation?" Hands shot up across the front of the room. Jake Morrison, the son of a famous general, waved his hand. Eagerly, "Sir, the defensive ring provided maximum coverage of the station's vulnerable points while maintaining overlapping fields of fire." "Correct, Cadet Morrison. And why was this the optimal choice?" Williams moved between the desks, his boots clicking on the metal floor. Lisa Chen raised her hand. "It allowed our ships to concentrate their firepower while the enemy had to spread their forces thin to attack from all sides." Maya wrote down every word in her notebook. Her handwriting was small and neat. She had filled 6 notebooks already, this semester with detailed notes from every class. But she had never raised her hand. Not once. Williams continued the discussion for another 20 minutes. The same 5 or 6 cadets dominated the conversation, as always. Maya listened to their answers and noticed the gaps in their reasoning. She saw the flaws in their logic, but she kept her observations to herself. "Now," Williams said, activating the holographic display at the front of the room, "I want you to work in groups of 4. Design a battle formation for 12 human ships, facing 18 enemy vessels. The enemy has superior firepower but slower engines. You have 30 minutes. The room erupted in noise as cadets formed their groups. Maya remained in her seat, watching as her classmates chose their partners. She was never picked for groups. After 3 years, everyone knew she would just sit quietly and let others do the talking. Jake Morrison's group gathered around the center table. "We should use the standard wedge formation," he declared. "It worked for Admiral Torres at Titan." "But that was against different enemies," argued Lisa Chen from another group. "We need something new." Maya pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She always worked alone on group assignments. The professors allowed it because her written work was always excellent, even if she never spoke in class. She began sketching ship positions. 12 human vessels against 18 enemies. Superior enemy firepower meant direct confrontation would fail. Slower enemy engines meant they could not react quickly to position changes. Maya's pen moved across the paper in quick, precise strokes. She drew the human ships in an unusual formation that looked almost random at first glance. But there was a pattern. Each ship was positioned to exploit specific weaknesses in how the enemy would naturally deploy their forces. She calculated firing angles and movement vectors. The human ships would appear scattered and vulnerable, tempting the enemy to attack aggressively. But once the enemy committed to their assault pattern, the human formation would shift like a closing trap. Around her, the other groups debated loudly. Jake's team was arguing about shield distributions. Lisa's group could not agree on whether to focus on offense or defense. 2 other groups had given up and were just copying formations from their textbooks. Maya finished her design and began writing the tactical analysis. She explained how the formation would work in 3 phases. First, the apparent weakness would draw the enemy into overextending their attack. Second, the human ships would execute coordinated movements that would seem like retreat but were actually repositioning. Third, the trap would close, isolating enemy ships and destroying them with concentrated fire. "Time," Professor Williams announced. "Let's see what you've created." Jake's group presented first. Their wedge formation was competent but predictable. Williams nodded politely but made no comments. Lisa's group had designed an elaborate defensive shell that would probably work, but required perfect coordination. One by one, the groups presented their formations. Williams critiqued each one, pointing out strengths and weaknesses. Some designs were clever. Others were clearly copied from famous battles. "Miss Rodriguez," Williams said finally, "please share your work." Maya felt her cheeks burn red. She hated speaking in front of the class. Her voice always came out too quiet, and she forgot important details when people stared at her. She stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room. Her paper shook slightly in her hands. "I designed a formation that uses apparent weakness to create tactical advantage," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Speak up, please," Williams said, but his tone was not unkind. Maya cleared her throat and tried again. "The formation looks scattered, but it's actually a trap. The enemy will think we're poorly organized and attack aggressively. But when they commit to the attack, our ships can move to surround isolated enemy groups." She placed her paper on the projection pad. Her sketches appeared on the holographic display for everyone to see. The room grew quiet as the other cadets studied her work. Williams examined the formation carefully. His eyebrows rose as he traced the movement patterns Maya had drawn. "This is interesting, Miss Rodriguez. Can you explain how you calculated these positioning vectors?" Maya's voice grew steadier as she talked about the mathematics behind her design. She showed how each ship's position was chosen to maximize enemy mistakes while minimizing human vulnerabilities. She explained the timing sequences that would make the trap work. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Williams stared at the display for a long moment. "Class dismissed," he said finally. "Miss Rodriguez, please remain behind." Maya gathered her things nervously as the other cadets filed out. Several of them glanced back at her with expressions she could not read. Jake Morrison looked annoyed. Lisa Chen seemed impressed. When they were alone, Williams turned to face her. "How long did it take you to design this formation?" "About 20 minutes, sir." 20 minutes. Williams shook his head. "Miss Rodriguez, do you realize that this formation could revolutionize how human fleets engage superior enemies?" Maya did not know what to say. She had just done the assignment. The way that made sense to her. "I'm sending your work to Fleet Command," Williams continued. "They need to see this." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had never wanted attention from Fleet Command. She just wanted to finish her studies quietly, and maybe get assigned to a research position somewhere peaceful. But as she walked back to her dormitory that evening, Maya could not shake the feeling that her quiet life was about to change forever. She had no idea that her simple classroom assignment would soon be studied by admirals and generals across human space. The girl who never spoke in class had just created something that would help humanity survive the coming war. 6 months after graduation, Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance watching the stars through the main viewing screen. She wore the uniform of a junior tactical officer, with a lieutenant bars on her collar. The ship was her first real assignment, and she still felt out of place among the experienced crew. Captain Hayes was a tough woman in her 50s who had commanded the Defiance for 8 years. She ran a tight ship and expected her officers to speak their minds during briefings. Maya found this difficult. She preferred to submit her reports in writing rather than argue with senior officers in meetings. The bridge was quiet during the night shift. Maya liked these hours when most of the crew was sleeping. She could work on tactical analyses without interruption. Her computer screen showed fleet movement patterns and supply routes. She was always looking for weaknesses that enemies might exploit. "Rodriguez," Captain Hayes called from her command chair. "What's our status on the mining colony patrol route?" Maya turned from her station. "All shipping lanes are clear, Captain. No unusual activity in the sector." "Good. Keep monitoring." "Intelligence? Reports suggest Zephyrian raiders might be operating in this area." Maya nodded and returned to her work. The Zephyrians were a new threat that human forces did not fully understand yet. First contact had happened only 2 years ago when their ships attacked a survey vessel near the outer colonies. Since then, They had been raiding human settlements and capturing cargo ships. What worried Maya was how easily the Zephyrians seemed to predict human fleet movements. Their raiders always struck where human patrols were weakest. They avoided areas with heavy military presence and targeted isolated colonies with surgical precision. She pulled up the attack patterns on her screen and began analyzing them. There had to be something the other tactical officers were missing. The Zephyrians were not just lucky. They were following some kind of strategy that human commanders had not figured out yet. 2 hours later, the ship's alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed across the bridge as the crew rushed to their stations. Captain Hayes appeared within minutes, still putting on her uniform jacket. "Report," she ordered. "Distress signal from New Bakersfield Colony," the communications officer announced. "They're under attack by Zephyrian forces, multiple enemy ships detected." Captain Hayes studied the tactical display. "How many ships are we talking about?" "At least 6 raider vessels, possibly more. The colony's defenses are being overwhelmed." Maya felt her heart racing. New Bakersfield had 15,000 colonists, including many families with children. The colony's shield generators could only hold out for a few hours against sustained attack. "Set course for New Bakersfield, maximum speed," Captain Hayes commanded. "Contact Admiral Carter. Tell him we need immediate reinforcements." The Defiance jumped to hyperspace, but Maya knew they were still 3 hours away from the colony. By the time they arrived, the battle might already be over. She pulled up the colony's defensive layout on her screen and began calculating attack vectors. Something was wrong with the standard response plan. Maya had studied dozens of similar raids, and the human fleet always used the same approach. They would arrive at the colony and position their ships between the raiders and the planetary shields. It was a defensive strategy designed to protect civilian lives. But the Zephyrians had learned to counter this tactic. They would position their fastest ships to draw the human fleet away from the colony, while their heavy assault vessels continued the attack. The human commanders always fell for this trick because they were trained to protect civilian targets above all else. Maya began working on an alternative strategy. Instead of positioning defensively around the colony, what if the human ships attacked the Zephyrian fleet directly? The raiders were expecting a defensive response. An aggressive assault might catch them completely off guard. She ran the calculations on her computer. The plan was risky, but it could work if executed properly. The key was to attack the Zephyrian command ship first, disrupting their coordination before they could adapt to the new tactics. When the Defiance dropped out of hyperspace near New Bakersfield, the battle was already raging. 6 Zephyrian raiders were bombarding the colony's shields while their fighters strafed the outer settlements. Smoke rose from burning buildings as colonists fled to emergency shelters. "Standard defensive formation," Captain Hayes ordered. "Take position between the enemy and the colony." Maya stood up from her station. Her mouth was dry, but she knew she had to speak. "Captain, I request permission to propose an alternative tactical approach." Hayes looked surprised. Maya had never challenged orders before. "Make it quick, Lieutenant. The Zephyrians are expecting us to defend the colony. If we attack their command ship directly, we can disrupt their battle plan before they can counter our movements." "That would leave the colony exposed to their assault ships," Hayes replied. "Only for a few minutes. If we eliminate their command structure first, the remaining raiders will lose coordination. They'll be forced to retreat or fight individually." Hayes studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were already moving to counter the expected defensive deployment. Maya could see the trap forming just as it had in every previous raid. "Your plan puts civilian lives at risk," Hayes said. "The current approach puts them at greater risk," Maya replied. Her voice was steady despite her nervousness. "The Zephyrians have countered our defensive strategy in every previous engagement. They're prepared for it." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the bridge crew waited for her decision. On the main screen, the colony's shields flickered under the enemy bombardment. "All ships, this is Captain Hayes," she finally announced over the fleet communication channel. "Abort defensive formation. All vessels attack the Zephyrian command ship. Repeat, direct assault on the enemy flagship." The human fleet changed direction. accelerating toward the largest Zephyrian vessel. Maya watched the enemy ships react with obvious confusion. They had been positioning to counter a defensive formation, and now they were caught out of position. The battle lasted only 12 minutes. The Zephyrian command ship was destroyed in the first assault, and the remaining raiders found themselves isolated and outnumbered. 3 enemy vessels were captured, and the others retreated into hyperspace. Maya stood at her station watching the casualty reports come in. 23 colonists had been killed, but over 14,000 were saved. Under the previous defensive strategy, the death toll would have been much higher. Captain Hayes approached her station after the bridge had returned to normal operations. "That was good thinking, Lieutenant. Where did you learn to analyze enemy tactics like that?" "I studied all the previous Zephyrian raids," Maya replied. "I noticed they always used the same counter strategy against our defensive formations. And you figured out how to beat it." Maya nodded but said nothing more. She was not comfortable with praise or attention. She preferred to let her work speak for itself. Later that day, Captain Hayes submitted a detailed report about the battle to Fleet Command. She specifically mentioned Maya's tactical analysis and how it had led to the successful defense of New Bakersfield Colony. Maya did not know it yet, but her name was beginning to circulate among senior military officers. Admiral Carter read the report with great interest. He remembered seeing her tactical formation designs from the Academy 6 months earlier. This young lieutenant was developing a reputation for unconventional thinking that got results. Within a week, Maya received new orders. She was being transferred to Fleet Command Headquarters for advanced tactical training. The transfer meant leaving the comfortable routine she had established aboard the Defiance, but it also meant new opportunities to use her skills. As Maya packed her belongings, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that classroom assignment at the Academy. She was still the same quiet person who preferred working alone. But people were starting to notice her work. She was not sure if that was good or bad, but she knew there was no going back now. The war with the Zephyrians was escalating, and human forces needed every advantage they could find. Maya's ability to see patterns that others missed was becoming valuable in ways she had never imagined. Her quiet observations were starting to shape the future of human military strategy. Commander Maya Rodriguez stood in the briefing room at Fleet Command Headquarters, staring at the holographic star map that dominated the center of the room. Red markers showed Zephyrian-controlled systems, while blue markers represented human colonies. The red was spreading faster than anyone had expected. It had been a year since her transfer from the Defiance. Maya now wore commander's stripes and worked directly under Admiral Foster in the Strategic Planning Division. Her desk was covered with intelligence reports, battle analyses, and tactical projections. She had become the go-to officer for understanding Zephyrian military behavior. The briefing room filled with senior officers as Admiral Foster entered. He was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes. The war was taking its toll on everyone in command positions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster began, "the situation has become critical. The Zephyrians have captured 3 more colony systems in the past month. Their advance toward the core worlds is accelerating." Maya watched the display update with new enemy positions. The Zephyrian fleet movements followed patterns she had been tracking for months. They were not just raiding anymore. This was a full invasion with clear strategic objectives. Intelligence suggests they're building a major supply depot in the Kepler 438 system. Foster continued. This facility supports their entire offensive operation. If we can destroy it, we might be able to slow their advance significantly. Captain Miller, one of the more experienced fleet commanders, raised his hand. "Sir, Kepler 438 is deep in enemy territory. Any attack force would have to fight through 3 defensive lines to reach the target. Exactly why this mission requires our best tactical thinking," Foster replied. He looked directly at Maya. "Commander Rodriguez, you've been studying Zephyrian supply operations. What's your assessment?" Maya stood up, feeling the familiar nervousness that came with speaking to senior officers. But she had learned to push through it over the past year. The supply depot is heavily defended, but it has a critical weakness. The Zephyrians believe humans lack the firepower for deep strikes behind enemy lines. She moved to the display controls and began highlighting enemy positions. They've concentrated their mobile fleets along the front lines. The depot itself is protected mainly by fixed defenses and patrol squadrons. How many ships would we need for such an operation? Asked Captain Stone. Maya had been working on this problem for weeks. 12 ships, sir, fast attack vessels with enhanced engines and minimal supply requirements. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Captain Miller shook his head. 12 ships against an entire enemy system. That's not a mission, it's suicide. Unless, Maya continued, we approach the problem differently than the Zephyrians expect. Admiral Foster gestured for silence. Explain your reasoning, Commander. Maya activated a detailed tactical display. The Zephyrians base their defensive planning on conventional human fleet doctrine. They expect us to attack with overwhelming force or not at all. A small, fast strike force operating behind enemy lines contradicts everything they think they know about human military capabilities. She traced a route through the star map that avoided major enemy concentrations. We can reach the depot by using hyperspace jump points that are too unstable for large fleets. 12 ships can navigate these routes safely. Larger forces cannot. Captain Miller studied the proposed route. Even if we reach the target, 12 ships can't destroy a major military installation. They can if they attack the right components, Maya replied. She highlighted specific structures within the supply depot. The facility depends on 3 fusion reactors for power. Destroying them simultaneously will cause a cascade failure that destroys the entire complex. Admiral Foster examined the plan carefully. Maya could see him weighing the risks against the potential benefits. The war was not going well for humanity. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Who would command such a mission? Foster asked. I volunteer, sir, said Captain Miller immediately. As do I, added Captain Stone. Maya felt her heart pounding. She had designed the mission, but she had never expected to lead it herself. She was a tactical analyst, not a fleet commander. But as she looked at the plan, she realized that no one else understood it as well as she did. I request permission to lead the mission myself, she said quietly. The room fell silent. Several officers stared at her in surprise. Maya had never commanded anything larger than a single ship, and that was only during training exercises. Admiral Foster raised an eyebrow. Commander, this mission requires someone with extensive combat experience. With respect, sir, this mission requires someone who understands Zephyrian tactical doctrine better than they understand ours. I've spent the past year studying their weaknesses. I know how they think and how they'll react to unexpected situations. Foster considered this for a long moment. What makes you think you can handle command of 12 ships in combat? Maya had been asking herself the same question. She was still the same quiet person who preferred working alone. But she had learned something important over the past year. Good tactics mattered more than loud speeches when lives were on the line. Because I listened to my officers instead of trying to impress them, she said. And because this mission depends on careful planning and precise execution, not heroic gestures. Foster nodded slowly. The mission is approved. Commander Rodriguez will lead Strike Force 12 into enemy territory. Captain Miller and Captain Stone will serve as her senior subordinates. Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had just volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war, but she also knew that her plan could work if executed properly. The next 2 weeks, Maya worked with her task force commanders to refine every detail of the operation. She met with each captain individually, learning their strengths and preferences. She did not try to change their command styles. Instead, she adapted her plans to make the best use of each officer's capabilities. The 12 ships were fast attack cruisers, equipped with enhanced hyperspace drives and extra fuel tanks. Each vessel carried a crew of 200 highly trained specialists. Maya knew that most of them would probably not survive the mission, but she also knew that thousands of colonists would die if the Zephyrian supply operations continued unchallenged. The night before departure, Maya sat in her quarters, reviewing the mission plans one final time. Everything looked correct on paper, But she knew that no plan survived contact with the enemy unchanged. She would have to adapt her tactics as the situation developed. There was a knock on her door. Captain Miller entered looking concerned. "Commander, I want you to know that my officers have complete confidence in this mission," he said. "Your tactical analysis has been brilliant throughout the planning process." Maya looked up from her data pad. "Thank you, Captain, but I have to ask, are you concerned about following orders from someone who's never commanded a fleet in combat?" Miller smiled. "Not at all. I've seen enough of your work to know that you understand warfare better than officers with twice your experience. My crew trusts your judgment completely." After Miller left, Maya returned to her preparations. She had spent her entire career avoiding leadership positions, but now she found herself responsible for 12 ships and 2,400 lives. The quiet girl who never spoke in class was about to lead the most important mission of the war. As she finally went to sleep that night, Maya wondered if she would still be alive in a week. But she also knew that if her mission succeeded, it might turn the tide of the entire conflict. For the first time in her life, being noticed might actually save lives, instead of just making her uncomfortable. Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Nightfall, watching the hyperspace tunnel collapse behind her fleet. 12 human ships had just completed the most dangerous jump of their lives, emerging deep in Zephyrian territory where no human vessel had ever traveled before. "All ships report successful arrival," announced Lieutenant Davis from the communications station. "No enemy contacts detected." Maya nodded but remained tense. The easy part was over. Now they had to destroy the most heavily defended supply depot in Zephyrian space and somehow escape alive. She had been planning this mission for months, but being here in person felt completely different from studying star charts back at headquarters. "Passive sensors only," Maya ordered. "I want to know everything about this system before they know we're here." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Maya had specifically requested experienced officers who could follow orders without constant supervision. She needed people who could think for themselves when communication became impossible during combat. Captain Miller's voice came through the secure channel from his ship, the UES Thunderbolt. "Commander, we're detecting the supply depot at coordinates 347 Mark 82. It's bigger than intelligence estimated." Maya pulled up the sensor data on her screen. The Zephyrian facility was enormous, stretching across 3 connected asteroids. Hundreds of cargo ships moved between the depot and nearby planets. This was clearly a major hub for the entire Zephyrian war effort. "How many defensive ships?" Maya asked. 36 patrol vessels and 18 heavy cruisers," reported Captain Stone from the UES Stormwind. "Plus fixed weapons platforms on each asteroid." Maya felt her stomach tighten. The enemy had 3 times as many ships as intelligence had predicted. Her original plan would not work against such heavy opposition. She needed to adapt quickly or the mission would fail before it began. "All commanders prepare for conference call," Maya announced. Within minutes, she was connected to all 11 of her subordinate captains through encrypted communications. "The situation has changed," Maya began. "Enemy strength is much higher than expected. We cannot attack the depot directly without suffering unacceptable losses." "Should we abort the mission?" asked Captain Miller. Maya studied the tactical display, looking for alternatives. The depot was too heavily defended for a direct assault. But there might be other ways to accomplish their objective. She noticed something interesting about the enemy patrol patterns. "Negative. We proceed with a modified plan. The Zephyrians have positioned their defensive ships to protect against attacks from the system's edge. They're not expecting us to approach from the asteroid belt." She highlighted a cluster of smaller asteroids between their current position and the target. "We'll split into 3 groups of 4 ships each. Group Alpha will create a distraction on the far side of the system. Groups Beta and Gamma will use the asteroid field to approach the depot from different angles." Captain Stone sounded concerned. "Commander, asteroid fields are extremely dangerous for military operations. One miscalculation could destroy multiple ships, which is exactly why the Zephyrians won't expect us to try it," Maya replied. "Their defensive doctrine assumes humans are too cautious to take such risks." Maya spent the next 20 minutes explaining the details of her new plan. Each group would have specific objectives and timing requirements. The success of the mission depended on perfect coordination between all 12 ships. Group Alpha, led by Captain Miller, will begin their attack in exactly 2 hours. Their objective is to draw enemy forces away from the depot. Groups Beta and Gamma will begin their approaches 30 minutes after Alpha engages the enemy. The captains acknowledged their orders and broke communication. Maya spent the waiting time reviewing sensor data and making final adjustments to her battle plan. She tried not to think about how many things could go wrong. 2 hours later, Maya watched distant explosions light up her sensor display. Captain Miller had begun his attack right on schedule. The Zephyrian patrol ships were moving to intercept him, just as Maya had predicted. Group Beta, begin approach, Maya ordered. Her own ship led 3 others through the treacherous asteroid field toward the depot's primary reactor complex. Navigating between the spinning rocks required constant attention from every crew member. Maya's helmsman, Chief Petty Officer Wilson, had spent years piloting ships through dangerous areas. His steady hands kept the Nightfall moving smoothly through gaps that seemed too narrow for a military vessel. Group Gamma is in position, reported Captain Stone over the communication channel. His 4 ships were approaching the depot's secondary facilities from a different angle. Maya could see the supply depot growing larger on her screen. The Zephyrian defenders were focused on the battle with Group Alpha and had not detected the YAO ships moving through the asteroid field. So far, everything was working according to plan. All groups, prepare for final assault. Execute on my command in 30 seconds. Maya watched the timer count down on her display. When it reached 0, she gave the order that would determine the outcome of the mission. Execute, execute, execute. 12 human ships attacked the Zephyrian supply depot simultaneously from 3 different directions. Maya's group targeted the main fusion reactors, while the other group struck key support facilities and defensive installations. The battle lasted 18 minutes. Maya's tactical planning proved correct as the confused Zephyrian defenders could not coordinate their response to attacks coming from multiple unexpected directions. The depot's reactors exploded in sequence, creating a chain reaction that destroyed the entire facility. But the escape proved more difficult than the attack. Zephyrian reinforcements arrived from nearby systems faster than Maya had anticipated. Her 12 ships found themselves surrounded by over 40 enemy vessels. All ships, emergency hyperspace jump, Maya ordered. Execute individual escape plans. The human fleet scattered in different directions, each ship jumping to pre-planned coordinates that would eventually bring them back to human space. Maya watched her tactical display as friendly contacts disappeared one by one into hyperspace. The UES Nightfall was the last ship to jump. As the hyperspace tunnel formed around her vessel, Maya saw that they had accomplished their mission. The Zephyrian supply depot was completely destroyed, and 11 of her 12 ships were escaping safely. 3 days later, Maya stood in Admiral Foster's office at Fleet Command Headquarters. Intelligence reports confirmed that the destruction of the supply depot had forced the Zephyrians to halt their offensive operations. The invasion had been stopped, at least temporarily. "Outstanding work, Commander," Foster said. "The President herself has approved your promotion to Admiral. You'll be taking command of the 3rd Fleet." Maya felt overwhelmed. She had gone from junior tactical officer to Fleet Admiral in less than 2 years. The quiet girl who had never spoken in class was now responsible for hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm ready for such a large command," Maya said honestly. Foster smiled. "Admiral Rodriguez, you just proved that unconventional thinking can defeat superior numbers. The 3rd Fleet needs someone who can see opportunities that traditional commanders miss." 6 months later, Admiral Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as human and Zephyrian diplomats signed a peace treaty. Her tactical innovations had changed the course of the war and forced the enemy to negotiate rather than fight. Maya still preferred working quietly behind the scenes, but she had learned that leadership sometimes meant accepting responsibility, whether you wanted it or not. She had proven that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one sitting quietly in the back corner, watching and learning. As she looked out at the stars, Maya thought about all the other quiet students in classrooms across human space. Some of them might be the next generation of leaders who would shape humanity's future among the stars. She made a mental note to establish a program that would identify and develop unconventional thinkers before the next crisis arrived. The girl who had never raised her hand in class had become the admiral who saved humanity from invasion. But she had never forgotten that true strength often came from those who observed carefully before they acted decisively.